Hank Williams, a senior, the man whose voice could make the toughest hearts break, died far too young at just 29 years old. His songs, aching, raw, and timeless, still roll through jukeboxes and radios across America's heartland, carrying the same sting they did the day he first sang them. But long after his final note faded, a quiet rumor began to drift through the country music world. It spoke of a small, plain wooden box hidden beneath Hank's bed, locked tight and never spoken of in public. It wasn't listed among his possessions, wasn't mentioned in any will, and those who had seen it swore Hank warned them never to open it. Some said it held lyrics he couldn't bring himself to sing. Others claimed it contained personal confessions too dangerous to see the light of day. For decades, the box was nothing more than a whisper, until it resurfaced, decades after his death. And when it did, what was found inside sent shockwaves through the Williams family and threatened to change everything we thought we knew about the man behind the music. Before the whispers of the box, there was the story of the man himself, a story as full of sorrow and triumph as the songs he left behind. Born Hiram Williams in Mount Olive, Alabama, in 1923, Hank came into the world with little more than grit and a crooked spine from spina bifida occulta, a condition that left him in constant pain. His father was absent for much of his childhood, confined to a veterans' hospital after World War I, leaving his mother, Lily, to raise the family alone. Life in rural Alabama was harsh, but young Hank found his refuge in music. On the streets of Georgiana, Alabama, he met Rufus T. Tot Payne, a black street musician who taught him guitar chords, blues phrasing, and how to turn life's hurt into melody. Those lessons would shape every note Hank ever played. By his teenage years, Hank was performing on Montgomery radio and leading his own band, the Drifting Cowboys. He had a voice that didn't just sing, it confessed. When he hit the Grand Ole Opry stage in 1949, the audience erupted, and for a moment, it seemed the boy from Alabama had finally outrun his hardships. But fame came with its own devils. His marriage to Audrey was turbulent, marked by deep love and deep betrayal. His drinking grew heavier, his dependence on painkillers more desperate, and the pressures of constant touring began to hollow him out. Yet even in his darkest nights, Hank wrote. He wrote everywhere, on scraps of paper, on the backs of bills, in tattered notebooks. Some of these lyrics became hits, like Your Cheatin' Heart and I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, songs that carried a truth no one could fake. But there were others, lines too personal, too haunting, that he never dared share. These he tucked away in secret places, and, as one close friend would later reveal, some of them found their way into a locked wooden box under his bed. It was there, away from the public eye, that Hank placed the pieces of his life he couldn't bear to let go of, and couldn't let anyone else see. The first whispers of the box began in 1952, the year everything in Hank Williams's life seemed to unravel at once. The Grand Ole Opry had banned him for missing too many shows. His health had deteriorated to the point where walking without pain was nearly impossible, and his drinking had escalated to dangerous extremes. He was living mostly in Montgomery again, away from the bright lights of Nashville, spending long nights in the dim glow of a kitchen lamp with nothing but a bottle and a stack of papers for company. Friends who visited noticed a change. Hank was quieter, more withdrawn, his writing even more obsessive. Don Helms, his steel guitarist, would later recall the night he walked in on Hank in his bedroom, crouched beside a small plain wooden box, sliding a bundle of letters inside before snapping a brass lock shut. When Don asked what it was, Hank didn't smile, didn't joke. He simply said, "That's for after I'm gone." It wasn't a phrase you forgot. Braxton Shuffert, another old friend, said Hank often hinted at unfinished business and things that folks wouldn't understand if I told them. His mother, Lily, was even more direct. She reportedly told certain relatives that whatever was in that box was never to be touched. Not while I'm living, not after I'm gone. Some assumed it was just where Hank kept personal mementos, but others suspected the contents were far more explosive. Private letters, secret lyrics, maybe even confessions about people and events he couldn't speak of. Through the final months of his life, the box remained under his bed, gathering dust while his body gave out and his spirit burned itself away. On December 31st, 1952, Hank climbed into the back seat of a Cadillac bound for Canton, Ohio, with Charles Carr at the wheel. By the time the sun rose on January 1st, 1953, Hank Williams Sr. was gone, his last ride ending on a lonely stretch of highway. And somewhere in that Montgomery home, the box sat waiting for someone to decide whether its secrets would ever see the light of day. When word spread that Hank Williams was dead, Montgomery erupted into chaos. Family, friends, neighbors, and fans flooded his home, some weeping openly, others quietly searching for a keepsake of the man whose voice had shaped their lives. Reporters called non-stop, photographers lingered outside, and the air was thick with grief and confusion. In the middle of that storm, the wooden box vanished. No one could say for certain who took it or when it was moved, but by the time the house began to empty, it was no longer under his bed. Audrey claimed she never laid eyes on it. Hank's mother, Lily, sidestepped the subject entirely. Rumors swirled almost immediately. Some said a trusted friend had taken it to protect Hank's memory. Others whispered it was hidden away because its contents could ruin reputations. The theories multiplied over the years. Some insisted the box held unfinished songs, more raw and vulnerable than anything Hank had ever recorded. Others believed it contained love letters from women other than Audrey, and still others claimed it might hold evidence of business dealings with the wrong kind of people. As the decades rolled on, the story of the box became a kind of ghost tale within country music circles, a mystery known only to those close to Hank, told in hushed tones after shows or in dimly lit bars. Then, nearly 30 years later, the ghost reappeared. In 1980, during a bitter legal battle over Hank's estate between his son, Hank Jr., and his late mother Audrey's side of the family, an old storage unit was opened. Buried under stage costumes, battered instrument cases, and stacks of yellowed papers sat a plain wooden box with a tarnished brass lock. It was unmarked, unassuming, and covered in dust. But those who remembered the old rumors knew instantly what it might be. After decades of silence, the box that had vanished from under Hank's bed was back. And with it came the dangerous question no one could ignore. Would they dare open it? The reappearance of the box didn't bring peace. It tore open wounds that had never fully healed. By 1980, Hank Williams Jr. had carved out his own identity as a country music star, but the shadow of his father's legacy was something he could never escape. To him, the box was more than an object. It was a bridge to the man he'd lost before he was even 4 years old. But not everyone in the family saw it that way. Some believed the box was sacred, a part of Hank Sr.'s private life that should never be exposed. Others feared what might happen if its contents were made public. Old scandals resurrected, reputations destroyed, and the carefully curated image of the country legend shattered. The legal dispute over Hank Sr.'s estate was already tense, with disagreements over song rights, royalties, and personal property. When the box was brought into the conversation, it became the centerpiece of a battle that was as emotional as it was legal. Lawyers argued about whether it should be considered family property, historical material, or personal effects to be left unopened. The whispers about its contents only made matters worse. Some recalled Hank's mother, Lily, warning that the box was dangerous. Others repeated the story of Don Helms catching Hank locking it and hearing the words, "That's for after I'm gone." For Hank Jr., the possibility of hearing his father's unfiltered thoughts, reading his handwriting, understanding his private world, was irresistible. For others, the idea was terrifying. The tension reached a breaking point when it became clear that someone would have to make the decision. Open the box and risk whatever truths lay inside, or lock it away forever and let the mystery die with them. The decision to open the box was not taken lightly. When the day finally came, the air in the room felt heavy, as if everyone present understood that whatever lay inside had the power to alter the way the world remembered Hank Williams forever. The brass lock was old and tarnished, but it still resisted the first few attempts to pry it open. When it finally gave way with a dull snap, a tense silence filled the space. The first items they saw were innocent enough: black and white photographs of Hank on stage, candid snapshots of him laughing with friends, worn guitar picks, ticket stubs, and neatly folded set lists from long-forgotten performances. But as the first layer was cleared away, the mood in the room shifted. Beneath the mementos were stacks of envelopes, each addressed in Hank's distinct handwriting to names no one immediately recognized. Some letters were tender, filled with longing and poetic musings. Others were raw, almost bitter, as though written in the heat of anger or deep regret. There was also a weathered notebook, its cover cracked, and its pages yellowed with age, filled margin to margin with lyrics no one had ever heard. Songs darker, more confessional, and more painfully honest than anything he'd released in his lifetime. And then, at the very bottom, there it was, a single sealed envelope with the words, "Do not open," scrawled across it in thick, deliberate handwriting. The message was unmistakable, a warning, or perhaps a dare. Some in the room hesitated, suggesting it should be left untouched, that opening it might violate Hank's final wishes. But curiosity has a way of overpowering caution. After a long, uneasy pause, the seal was broken, the paper crackling under careful fingers as the envelope was opened, and its contents slid into light for the first time in decades. Inside the envelope was a letter, 3 pages long, written in Hank's unsteady hand during what must have been the final weeks of his life. The paper was yellowed and brittle, the ink uneven and blotched in places, as if his hands had been trembling or the pen had paused mid-thought. It wasn't a song, though it carried the same raw rhythm and haunting honesty that lived in his music. The opening lines hit like a blow, a confession, plain and unguarded. Hank wrote that he felt trapped by the fame he had once prayed for, trapped by the contracts and promises that now felt like chains, and trapped by the faces around him, faces he once trusted, but now could not. He admitted to owing debts, not just money, but things that can't be paid back in dollars, to men he described as the wrong kind. He never named them, but the tone of his words was one of fear, not anger. These debts, he hinted, had begun to close in on him, and with them came threats that extended beyond his own life. Then came the most startling part. Hank spoke of a final deal he had made, not to save his career, not to save himself, but to protect someone he loved. He didn't write their name, but the tenderness of his language made it clear they were central to everything. He wrote that the price of this deal had been steeper than I could carry, and that the weight of it was breaking him apart. Between these confessions were flashes of paranoia, of feeling watched and followed, of voices telling him that his time was nearly up. "I'm not afraid to go," he wrote in one chilling line, "but I'm afraid of what happens to her if I do." Halfway through the letter, his tone shifted, becoming almost resigned, as if he'd accepted the inevitable. He spoke directly to whoever might find the box, warning them not to believe everything they'd been told about him. "When I'm gone, the truth will be in this box," he wrote, underlining the words so hard the pen nearly tore the paper. It wasn't clear if he meant the truth about his personal life, his career, or his death. But in that moment, everyone reading it understood why he had kept the box hidden. Tucked beside the letter was a small black and white photograph, its edges curling with age. It showed a young woman, her face half in shadow, looking directly into the camera. Her expression was unreadable. Was it longing, sadness, or something darker? She wasn't Audrey, his wife, nor any known family member. No one in the room could say they had ever seen her before. On the back of the photograph, in Hank's unmistakable handwriting, was a single word: forever. The simplicity of it made the mystery even heavier. Who was she? Why was she the only photograph kept with this letter? Was she the person Hank had been protecting? The room fell into an uneasy silence. For some, the contents of the envelope confirmed every suspicion they had. That Hank's final days had been far more complicated, far more dangerous than the public had ever known. For others, it was too much, too personal. They argued that the letter and photograph should be destroyed, erased from the record to preserve the legend. But a smaller group insisted they were too important to hide, that this was history, a glimpse into the true heart of a man the world had only ever known in fragments. No matter which side they were on, everyone in that room understood one thing: the envelope hadn't answered the questions surrounding Hank Williams. It had only deepened them, turning the box from a curiosity into a dangerous, living secret. Not everything that came out of the box would ever see the light of day. According to several people who were present, parts of the notebook, select letters, and even sections of the 3-page confession were quietly removed before any official description of the contents was given. What happened to those missing pieces is still debated. Some claim they were handed directly to Hank Williams Jr. for safekeeping. Others insist they were locked away in a private family archive, accessible only to a handful of trusted individuals. The public statement released afterward painted the box as little more than a time capsule, filled with sentimental items and memorabilia. There was no mention of the mysterious woman's photograph, no mention of debts owed to dangerous men, no mention of a final deal made to protect someone he loved, and certainly no mention of the chilling line that read, "When I'm gone, the truth will be in this box." Those who had been in the room during the opening knew the truth, but the silence surrounding it became a wall too high for outsiders to climb. That silence bred rumors, and the rumors became legend. Some believed the missing documents proved Hank had been involved in illicit dealings that might have placed his life in danger. Others were convinced the photograph pointed to a hidden love affair, perhaps even a child the public never knew existed. And then there were those who took the darker view, that the letter was not just a personal confession, but a breadcrumb trail leading to the real cause of his death. The official story remained clean, polished, and safe, but those who had seen the unfiltered truth knew that the box had the power to shatter the myth of Hank Williams and replace it with a man who was far more complicated and far more human than the legend allowed. In the end, the decision was made. The most sensitive pieces would be buried again, locked away where they couldn't harm the family, the legacy, or the carefully guarded image of country music's first superstar. Today, the story of the box under Hank Williams Sr.'s bed remains one of the most enduring mysteries in country music history. A story that refuses to fade, no matter how many decades pass. Officially, the box and whatever remains of its contents are said to be in the hands of the Williams estate, tucked away somewhere far from public eyes. But unofficially, whispers suggest that not all of it is hidden. Some claim copies of certain letters have quietly changed hands over the years, shared among trusted friends, private collectors, or historians who understand the weight of what they hold. Every so often, a fragment surfaces, an alleged line from the missing confession, or a blurred photocopy of the photograph marked "Forever," but never enough to confirm the full truth. For fans, the mystery feels almost poetic. Hank's music had always carried a sense of confession, of deep wounds set to melody, of truths just out of reach. Songs like "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry" and "Your Cheatin' Heart" sounded like they'd been pulled straight from the depths of his soul. But if the box is to be believed, there were things he could never bring himself to put in a song. Things too dangerous, too personal, or too damning. And maybe that's why the box still holds so much power. Because it reminds us that even legends have shadows. Over the years, journalists, biographers, and die-hard fans have all tried to piece together the puzzle. Some believe the woman in the photograph was a lost love from before Hank became famous, someone he felt he'd wronged and had tried to protect. Others are convinced she was connected to the wrong kind of men mentioned in his letter, perhaps caught up in whatever deal Hank alluded to. A few go even further, suggesting the contents of that envelope hint that Hank's death on New Year's Day, 1953, may not have been as simple as the official reports claimed. These theories can never be proven, and perhaps that's exactly how the family intends it to stay. The legend of the box thrives precisely because it is incomplete. It forces us to look at Hank Williams not as an untouchable icon, but as a flesh-and-blood man, brilliant, flawed, conflicted, and maybe even afraid. And in a strange way, that only deepens the connection his fans feel. When his voice drifts through the static of an old radio or cuts through the quiet of a dark highway, it carries more than melody. It carries the weight of a story unfinished, a chapter locked away, a truth that may never be told. Whether the box holds the key to understanding Hank Williams or simply another layer of mystery, its existence ensures that his name will never fade into the past. Because as long as the box remains closed, Hank Williams Sr. will remain more than just a man from Alabama who sang about heartache. He will remain a legend wrapped in secrets, a mystery that even death could not silence.